Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Claire Brown and I am the Young Adult Services Coordinator here at Red Deer Public Library. Before we get into tonight's program, I would just like to take a moment. As part of our commitment to reconciliation, Red Deer Public Library acknowledges that we live, work, learn, and play on the traditional and current lands of the Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 First Nations people and of the Métis people of Region 3. Tonight, we welcome author Max Eisen, the 2019 Canada Reads winner author of By Chance Alone, a remarkable true story of courage and survival at Auschwitz. And we are very pleased to welcome our first champion for our first title, who is Mayor Veer. Thank you both for being here tonight and sharing a little bit of time with us. So before we get into everything, I will just be sharing my screen. So just, sorry, bear with me one moment here. Okay, and I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Veer.
Thank you so much, Claire. My fellow Red Deerians, it's such an honor to be able to be here with you tonight. It's an honor to be here, and forgive me, I'm very emotional tonight. This week we marked Holocaust Survivors Week, and we're so honored to be joined tonight by my dear friend and a much-loved Canadian, Max Eisen. And I just want to thank the leadership staff and many volunteers of Red Deer Public Library for your vision to host us for Red Deer Reads. I cannot think of anything that I could be prouder of than to be a community champion for my friend Max's book and to read By Chance Alone. I love books. I love all aspects of reading and books. And I am so passionate that Max needs to be, his book needs to be our champion book for 2021. So I am proudly waving the flag for Max's book, and then our hope is that Red Deer would choose it as our book of choice for this year. And we would invite Max to be here with us in person. Tonight we'll only get a glimpse of Max's incredible story, but that we would invite him as a community, give him a Red Deer welcome in the fall, and hear his story. And it's just so timely that he's here. So I'm just going to share a couple slides from how I met Max, why he's so important to me, and why he's so important to, I think, the people of our community and country. Then we're going to ask Max a couple of questions, and we'll conclude there. So I had the opportunity to attend a delegation of Canadian leaders with elected officials and Canadian police chiefs in 2019, and it was entitled Compassion to Action. And so this is a picture of Max in Berlin in front of an Anne Frank mural. It's by far my favorite photo of the trip because it shows that Max not only survived, that he thrived, and that he has truly put his experiences and learnings into action to change our country for the better. Next slide. This is Max's book, By Chance Alone. Every delegate read this book, and then to travel with Max, we traveled to Germany, to Poland, and we ended in Israel. To follow the story of the Jewish people and to learn about how Nazi Germany and how it was ultimately government officials that made the plan for the genocide which occurred. And this is Max's incredible book. And as I noted, this truly is my hope that as a community, we would embrace this book. Next slide. This is a photo of Max sitting looking at the outline fence to the Warsaw Ghetto. I took photos of Max. I believe that it was an incredible gift to be able to sit with Max every day and to learn from him and to carry on the torch of his experiences so that we can prevent a Holocaust from ever happening again. Next. Of course, when we traveled in Poland, this was at Auschwitz. That's at the gate of Auschwitz. Next slide. While we were there, I cannot even explain what a transformative, sobering life experience it was. This is in front of Block 21. This is the medical building. Max's book, he talks about his experience in that medical building. And so that's a photo of Max in it, telling about his story there. And that really is an important part of his book. Next slide. One of the learnings that we had throughout our trip, this is a picture of shoes at Auschwitz. Next slide. And this is a picture of glasses at Auschwitz. But one of my deepest learnings is really for us to be advocates for transformation and change. You know, you think particularly about issues of racism and discrimination and the long-term consequences if we're not empowered to speak up and to act before it's too late. Is that you either go through the experience yourself and you're a passionate advocate, or you need to put yourself in the shoes and to see yourself or to hear the perspectives of people. So Max and I tonight would like to just dedicate our presentation and our appeal to our community for those who unfortunately walked through these experiences and to try to help our community see things from their perspective. Next slide. This is one of the most powerful photos that from our trip, and I would like to share. I don't want to say too much about it now, but this was probably one of the most transformative moments in my life. In Max's book, he tells a story. This, and I'll show you a slide shortly, but Max was telling us a story here, and he tells this story in his book as well. This was where close to where Max was standing when he said his final goodbye to his dad and his uncle. And there was a guard standing, you can see the guard tower there behind Max. And that was the last time Max saw the members of his family that were remaining at Auschwitz. And he made a promise to his dad, and his promise was that if Max survived, that he would go and that he would tell people what had happened there so that it would never happen again. And the reason why this was so transformative for me was because, you know, Max obviously being an elderly gentleman feels a compulsion and has an ethical imperative to pass on this knowledge and experience while he is alive and able to do so. And he needs champions in Canada and in our world to take up that torch with him. And just like Max made that promise to his dad and to his uncle, I made that promise to Max that I would take up the torch with him and for him. And I made that promise, I made that promise in that moment. So next slide, please. So this is the other side of the gate where Max said goodbye to his dad and uncle. Next slide. And this is the Book of Life. And if you look about mid of the page, you can see Max's family names right there. And I think, yeah, so that's Max's family, and they're commemorated in the Book of Life. Okay, next slide. And I included this slide. There are quotes throughout Auschwitz, you know, throughout the interpretive centers, you know, and there's an often quoted, and I'll just paraphrase it. And I think this is really important initiative for the Red Deer Public Library, because where there is an often used quote that where they will burn books, one day they will burn people. And that really was Max's experience. And so I appeal to my community to choose this book so that we can prevent this from ever happening again. I'm going to go to the next slide, and it is a bit of a disturbing slide, but this is a photo of Max, and somebody had put this graffiti on it, and my heart broke when I saw this for my friend. But this slide, as hard as it is to look at this picture, gives us are imperative to hear Max, to learn from Max, because if this is how freely people are using hate language to someone who walked through this experience, it is demonstrating that we have not fully learned from the past, and that we need to speak up and stand up to prevent it from ever happening again. So I know that that's very difficult for Max to see that picture, but this picture shows that we have a duty to Max and to all others who experienced what he has, that the torch truly is ours. Next slide. So Max is my friend for life. I learned from Max just in his formal sharing. I learned from him in his book. And every day I got to have Max, I got to have breakfast with Max. And it really was truly one of the greatest honors of my life to be able to learn from him, and to just spend time with him, and to be an advocate with him, and to stand with him in solidarity. And so my community friends in Red Deer and region, and users of the Red Deer Public Library, we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet an incredible man, to champion his book, and to champion his arrival in Red Deer so we can learn from him firsthand. And so, friends, please join me in welcoming my lifelong friend, my inspiration, a great Canadian, a great person, and someone who we're so honored to have with us, Max Eisen.
Thank you. Mayor Veer, Tara, I'm honored and humbled to being invited to Red Deer. I want to thank all of your helpers who put this program together. And it is amazing. I haven't seen you since Berlin, I guess. And it was really a memorable trip. And for me, meeting different people when I go on these trips, it helps me a lot to have people with me who are my supporters when I'm on these difficult trips. So, yes, I wrote this book, and it was an amazing story. I'll tell you about the book, I suppose, when you'll ask me the questions, or shall I?
Yep.
Tell you right now why? So.
Yeah, I think we'll start, Max, if you could just tell us, you know, why did you decide to write a book? You had a story to tell, and some people
Yes.
have written books and some haven't, but why did you decide?
Yes. Well, the question was here, when did you decide? And I changed it to, why did I write this book? You see, I've written this book. I've been a speaker and educator prior to my writing the book, which took me 5 years. For 25 years, I've been a speaker and educator. And I've traveled this country, and I was in Calgary, and I love the West. I did a lot of work in Saskatchewan. And as you said before, my father's last wish was, can you picture us closed in this horrible place of Auschwitz I, with electrified barbed wire all around, double electrified wires? We didn't know what was going on in the world. We were brought in from Hungary in 1944. We had no idea what was going on and what was happening to the Jewish people all through the continental Europe, simply because we lived in a fascist country where everything is censored and the propaganda is nonstop. And it's a time when the lies become the truth. So we knew what was going on in Auschwitz. I didn't know about other death camps in Poland because we didn't know this kind of news. And my father was reaching across the wire fence. And by the way, just to correct you, that picture where you saw me on that spot with that booth, you know, that was not the guard tower. That was, you remember, on the kitchen. The gong was there. And there was a place right next to it where they were hanging people, and there were 4 girls hanged in that spot on January the 12th, January the 6th, 1945. So this is why I wrote this book. And in 1988 or 89 or 1990, perhaps, there was a man in Toronto who came to Canada for a better life, and he was a Holocaust denier. His name was Ernest Zundel. Can you imagine, we survivors who went through this terrible ordeal, we came to this wonderful country. We left all these troubles behind us, and we left all the hatred behind us, and we arrived here and we worked very hard to start a new life. I myself arrived alone. Unlike many immigrants come with their entire families, I had nobody left from 80 some odd people. And who would have thought? So when this Ernest Zundel came on the scene, it was a shock to all the survivors that this can happen in Canada. I found out the law in Germany is that if you say the Holocaust didn't happen, you go straight to jail. You cannot say that. But here in Canada, we have free speech. So he gave a lot of problems and a lot of heartache to a lot of survivors and others, I suppose. But we didn't take it maybe seriously enough. And as things have progressed today, you know, this hatred of Jews is out there, unbridled hatred, and we are truly in shock of the Jewish community, and simply because, and this is my book where I lay it out exactly how these things start. They start with words, with propaganda. People get on board and they buy it, and perhaps children get brainwashed. That's exactly the way the Nazis operated. You see, they took away the kids in school. They had to join the Hitler Youth. The girls had to join the BDM movement, and they were brainwashed to a point where eventually they had to come to 3 meetings every week, the Hitler Youth. And eventually they had to tell the story of what their parents were talking about at home and report it to the leader of the group. So we are in total shock. Who would have believed that I will be in Canada? And just to give you a little point of view, we had an amazing man, a Lord Rabbi, the late Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the chief rabbi of Britain. He died about 5 months ago, or 6 months ago. He was truly our leader. When he spoke in the House of Lords, there wasn't an empty seat. And we talk about anti-Semitism today. It's a very antiseptic word. And he stated that anti-Semitism is a virus that keeps mutating. And we are living with this COVID virus. You know, you can almost, you can sort of realize that we're having a virus, we are locked down, and anti-Semitism sweeping through Europe. So he said that in the Middle Ages, they hated the Jews in Europe because of our religion. In the 19th and 20th century, they hated us because of our race. And today they hate us because of our nation state, the tiny little country, 9,700 square kilometers, Israel. And so here we are facing a huge mountain of hatred. It's not only anti-Semitism, there's other movements called BDS movements, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, to boycott Israel, a democratic country who is fighting for their life for 70 years. And so there's a lot in this book. To write a book, you hope that people will read from the past so that we don't repeat the same mistakes. And if we don't read and if we repeat the same mistake, there's something wrong with us. So I wrote this book. Took me 5 years. Was published in 2015. I guess I started in 2010. As I said, I was speaking for 25 years, and countless students kept asking me, Mr. Eisen, did you put this down on paper? You know, I can speak for hours to students, but I dreaded to sit down and start writing a book. To me, it seemed such a high mountain to climb. I was afraid to sit down and bring back the demons. You know, you have to have a tough hide, you know, to go out and speak to thousands and thousands of people. You know, many mornings, you know, I have butterflies in my stomach. But, you know, I've been speaking to 30,000, Zooming to 30,000 students and teachers. So you get to know, but you still have these butterflies. And I'm still into it. I keep networking, trying to get my word out to as many people as possible. So we have a lot of work to do, people to understand and to accept. We need to respect each other in this country. We are in serious condition. The world is in a terrible state, if you look around. And unless we start to respect each other, not tolerate each other, respect each other, we're going to be in serious problems too. So I sat down. People would sit down and they have a computer and a keyboard, and they would start to type and put their memoir on a computer. So if I had to type my memoirs with 2 fingers, because that's about all I can. And so I figured, how am I going to do this? So my wife and I were talking. She said, well, why don't you take an 8.5 by 11 by 8.5 sheet of paper, fold it in half, and you have 4 columns. Put down page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. And I was writing with a pencil on paper for about 3 years. I have thousands of papers. I still have them. And then I was dictating from these papers. And my wife, my son, and my granddaughter were putting it on the computer. Somebody who told me, and she's in the book, she's a professor, Amanda Gzib. We were on a mission to Poland. And she said, Max, if you start to write, I'll be honored to be your editor. I'll do the editing for you. So, and she did. And so you start to write this, and it looks to you, it's like a gigantic project. You know, where do you start? And I was sitting at the lake. I have a little cottage out there on this lake. It's called Lake Simcoe. But actually, the real name of the lake, it's the First Nation name, but it's called the Lake of Shimmering Waters. And a beautiful sunny day, you can just see like thousands of little minnows sort of racing on the surface, but the lake can get pretty angry at times. So I kept thinking, how am I going to start? So I laid out all the important points that I want to write about in chronological order. And then I realized I don't have to go chronologically. I can just, so you start to write, and the old demons come back to haunt you, and you wake up at 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the morning, and you cannot go back to sleep anymore. And this is the best time when it's all quiet, and the words were just pouring out. I said to myself, I have to look at this movie in my head, and all I'm going to do is put it down on paper. So I had about, 50 pages, sent it away to Amanda on the computer, of course. And she went through it, edited it. She said, keep writing. Well, that was a real big encouragement, but you know, I was so into it. And once you start, And, you know, this binder starts to get a little more pages in there. You want to see it finished. And it took about 3 years. And then I was going on the March of the Living. This was in 2015. And I phoned HarperCollins. And to my luck, years before, when I was on a mission, the editor of nonfiction books was on that mission. And we kept in touch with each other, but I didn't have any books to send to him. We kept in touch. So I'm leaving on the March of the Living 3 days later, and I phoned him that morning. I said, look, Jim, I'm leaving on the March of the Living in 3 days. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I have my memoirs here ready. I think it's ready. You know, the nonstop editing, you know, typos and then this and changing and back and forth. So he said, sure, just send it, you know, I'll have to read it. And that's it. I pushed the button, sent it up, and it was like losing a child. I was so attached to these papers. So 2 days later, a day before leaving, I received an email from HarperCollins that we would be honored to publish your memoirs. I just about fell off the chair. So, the question here is, what is the best part, the favorite or least favorite part of publishing a book or writing it? Well, all those things are not very...
So if I can ask now, Max,
Yeah.
so now that your book's published and now that you promote your book,
Yeah.
because promoting your book, you relive the emotion of your experiences. So what's your, you know, what's the greatest challenge when you promote your book now? But what do you like about promoting your book now that it's
Well,
published?
I love promoting it. I like to network, and I always promote my book. And it's grueling work to promote your book. I found out that if you're an older gentleman, somebody I got a sort of word at the CBC office, from the CBC office, and they looked at me and they realized that I'm 89 or something. They said, how is this octogenarian going to be able to do this? You have to sit at CBC 6 hours a day for 2 days in a row and speak to Radio Canada in every city in this country where they have a radio station. Well, imagine speaking for 6 hours, but you know, I said, I got to change this around and talk to these people. And I said, you know, I was in your town just 2 weeks ago. He said, why didn't you call us? So now when I travel to these places, I tell them, and I always get a free interview. So, you know, you fall into and you have to love what you're doing. When you're promoting your book, they can tell you that you have to go to Montreal. The Walrus wants you to give a speech on resilience or write a paper, a 2,000-word paper for somebody for a newspaper and so on. They're always under the thumb. And, but you know, you manage to, and lo and behold, I was a finalist, and the other 5 finalists, RBC Taylor Award, that was a very prestigious award. And the other 4 were professional writers. And there was one writer who eventually won the prize, the RBC Taylor Award. He was a 3-time finalist before, so this was his 4th time. I said, that's for sure. He deserves to win this award. So it's a wonderful thing. You know, the biggest pleasure is that you get when you get the feedback from students. I have thousands of letters, and they're digitalizing all my letters and letters from officials and so on. Prime Minister with a short letter. I even have letters from Chancellor Merkel and the President of Germany. And this is the pleasure that I get a little watercolor paints in an envelope from a lady in Pentington, and she does these watercolors for me and puts it in an envelope. And amazingly, you know, the most important letters that I really treasure are kids who tell me that they have a very difficult time in school. They can't focus, and they said, you know, I pick up your book and I read a few pages from your book, and I'm set to go again. And he says, from now on, whenever I hit a rough spot, I pick up your book and I read from your book. Now that is really something. And so there's all kinds of things. And, you know, my book was launched in New York. It's published because a separate publication, because some words are American words, not Canadian, you know. So it was on January the 22nd in 2020. And a week later, everything was closed down. So I couldn't do a darn thing in New York. I mean, I do get some requests to speak on Zoom, but that is my book has been the bestseller of the year for many, many years. We've been down in sales these last 2 years because it's really tough to promote, and but it's coming back. And not only that, there's big school boards in Ontario that have taken my book to be used as a curriculum to teach the Holocaust in high schools. This is a big thing. So we've been working with teachers and we had Zoom meetings, and this is a big thing. So these books will be there. And I have a website. I don't know where you've seen it, bychancealone.com. It's a big website, and we'll keep updating it. So these are the things, the pluses that you get from having a book, and you know that.
Sorry, Max, we lost your audio. You froze up there for a second. I'm going to turn off my cameras to help with the bandwidth. There you are. You're back.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just keep my camera off just in case it's interfering with the call.
Okay.
So Max, why? Because now you're shortlisted for our community. Our Red Deer Public Library is incredible.
Yeah.
And every year they have Red Deer Reads. So it's one book, one community. And your book has been shortlisted this year. So you're in the top 3 in order to be our book of choice for this year. So why should your book be chosen? So if your book is chosen from the short list, it will mean that we will distribute copies to as many people in our city as possible.
Yeah.
And then we will have you here for an author visit. So in your opinion, why do you think it's important that our community choose your book?
Well, that would be a big honor if it was chosen. You know, there's other authors that have written their books, and I'm sure they worked very hard at it. And so it's, I think this book is a book for the time, for right now. It is important that people read this because it is very apropos to read it, so that people will realize how these terrible things start. It starts with words and it ends in terrible places. I keep saying that without history, there is no memory. And without memory, there is no future. And you need to read this book. We need to understand the politics, the games that are being played between governments and politicians. So I feel that from past performance, you know, I think, I know when I was up for Canada Reads, it was a big battle. And you never know what happens. I was a nervous wreck, and Zaya, she was fighting for my book, and we were hanging in the balance, but we were still there, the last 2, and they said, don't bother coming down to the radio station. He said, we'll call you. I said, well, I don't want to go down. He said, if I don't make it, you'll tell me get lost, get a cab, go back home. So anyway, it was just unbelievable, the performance that she did. And the other people that defended the others, they were all amazing people. They told me that they read my book and they couldn't stop crying, So, but it was a real fight. So I hope that I can win, but whichever way the cookie crumbles, I'll be happy just to be there, and my book will still be selling, and I'll keep on going. And don't forget, I'm an author who wrote a book, but I'm also a speaker who travels. I don't think another author that has put in these many miles that I did to educate people for 31 years, that's a career by itself. And so I'm hoping that people will like my book and they'll vote for it. And that will be a very happy event for me, that's for sure. And for you as well. It is you that started this. So we're both in it. So I think they won't be sorry that they voted for it. But if they read it, and a lot of people will get to read my book before anyway, before they make their decision. So that's a good thing too. So I want people to understand what a terrible places those killing places were. Auschwitz 1, you all saw there were brick buildings. It was the only camp. There were different camps. There were slave labor camps, there were concentration camps, and there were death camps. So where I was in Auschwitz 1 was a labor camp. Auschwitz 2, Birkenau, 4 kilometers up the road, was a death camp operating with 4 gas chambers and crematoria and a partial labor camp. How do you survive a second to second in this place when you are starved? I've seen the best and the worst of what happens to people. And I read a lot about the women in the women's camps. The women helped each other. They formed Lager Sisters support groups. That did not happen in the men's camp. And the 4 heroines that were 4 young Jewish girls, 2 girls from Slovakia and 2 girls from Poland, they were part and smuggling out some explosives to blow up one of the gas chambers and crematoria. And in January the 6th, the last few dying days of Auschwitz, they hauled us out. Thousands of us, we had to watch this as these 4 girls were being hanged, prepared to be hanged. They were brought to the gallows where I was standing there, right there. There was a gallows. And they were black and blue. Their hands were tied. They didn't want their heads covered. They were stood up on the gallows, and before they pulled the lever, they all yelled out 2 Hebrew words, Hazak ve'amatz, which means they were telling us, be strong and of good courage. This is what they told us. There's nothing braver than that. And I can never get over this, that we just stood there and we couldn't do a darn thing. We were covered with SS groups and attack dogs. And there was a groan that went out from thousands of men, to see that these 4 young girls are dying for us. And there's nothing we could do. I can never get over that scene. I can see that. And so it was your life was hanging in the balance. And to tell you a story about April the 1st or thereabouts, the Wiesenthal Center phoned me that they had an email from Slovakia, from my town, which is called Moldova today, Slovakia now. A teacher from a high school is looking for a Mr. Eisen. Do you know a Mr. Eisen? So they emailed it to me, and there was the teachers. I contacted the teacher. I said, I am here, I am alive, you know. This was 77 years, almost to the day, when this email arrived from Slovakia. We were hauled away from our home on the first day of Passover in 1944. And this email this year arrived 2-3 days before Passover. And I kept thinking, my gosh, isn't this something? 77 years. So anyway, we set up a Zoom and we got to know each other, and we set up a date, and I spoke to a few hundred of her students. They speak English quite well. She's perfect in English. And I spoke to them for 4 hours. It was a town of 5,000 people when I lived there. Today there are about 15,000, 20,000 people. I almost can't recognize the town, the city. But you know, there are two churches, Eastern Orthodox Church and the Protestant Church, and there was a synagogue. And these churches have been upgraded and they're shining beautiful. And the synagogue is left a derelict building. It's black. There was a beautiful big wrought iron fence around the synagogue, and that's gone. And I kept thinking, I had a property, I still have a property there. I mean, I have, but it's not mine. They simply said that they couldn't find the name Eisen in the registry. And we find exactly that it was on somewhere else. But so there's a scrapyard in my town. And I kept thinking that this scrapyard, they removed this huge wrought iron fence from around the synagogue. So it sits there. And I said to the teacher, I said, you know, I was there in 2019. I was doing a documentary for the Spielberg Foundation. It upset me to no end to see the synagogue that was a focal point of the Jewish community. It's like a derelict thrown away, or is being there shown for some reason. Look at this black building here. I said, when I saw this in 2019, I was very upset. I said, whose responsibility is this to do something? And she said, it is our responsibility. And she said the mayor was going to do something about it, fix it up. I said, it's wonderful. So 2 weeks later, another teacher sent me a request from Slovakia, from a neighboring town. And I just spoke to her students in Slovak Republic. And they have a Erasmus project where they work with other students from other countries. So they work with Poland, Italy, and Greece, and Slovakia. So I spoke to them, and there were about 800 students that I spoke to in 4 countries in Europe. So this is an amazing thing. It gave me an entirely whole new vision of what can be done on the website, you know, on a Zoom. So this is my work, and I tell you, I've done a lot of talking. I had weeks, I had 6, 7 presentations a week. I had 2, sometimes I had 3. And but it's a wonderful thing that I had something to do. Otherwise, I would be climbing walls. So it's, you know, I don't shirk from work and responsibility. And I tell young people, and I told my grandchildren, I'm trying to teach my great-grandchildren. I had a lot of my work ethics and my life ethics that was hammered into my head. My mother was our my guardian angel. My grandfather was my teacher and my mentor. And I'll never forget, I worked with him in the garden. I could prune trees and I could graft trees. I was 7 years old. I worked with him in the lumber yard. No matter what dirty work I did, he hammered into my head. No matter what you're going to do, you have to be the best at it. And this is how I led my life. So, but this was a challenge for a lot of students and people. This COVID, they were locked in, and people were simply afraid. And we had our second shots, and so we feel a little safer. But so what else I just want to tell you. When I parted with my father, we only had a second to say goodbye, to show you how the precision work that the Nazis had. They had a punch card machine. It was an early IBM product. Can you imagine the killers were their own archivists and bookkeepers? They wrote everything down. Anyone that had a tattooed number, they kept a record of it all over the camps. So I'm going to show you a document that was 20 years ago. It was found in the Auschwitz Museum archives. You see, they received a pile of a whole truckloads or container loads of documents from Russia, because the Russians liberated Auschwitz. They took away all the documents that were not burned, because before the Nazis left Auschwitz, they tried to burn as much as all the documentation. So I'm going to show you, I don't know if you can see this. How can I show it? Can you see anything? I can't hear you. Oh.
If you hold it up to your camera, Max, if you hold it a little higher, there, we can see it.
Can you see the numbers?
Yes.
And then if you look at the top, you see the number starts with A before the number, a letter.
Okay.
A are the Hungarian Jews that were brought there in 1944. 450,000 Hungarian Jews were murdered in 3 months. And you see further down, Eisen, Zoltan, and Eisen Yanu.
Can you lift it a little bit higher? And then there, now we can see it.
Do you see Eisen, E-I-S-E-N?
Yes.
9891.
Yep.
My number is 9892, and my uncle is 9893.
Okay, could you hold it a little bit higher, Max? Would that be all right? There we go. Yeah, we can see it.
So this is what it is. Can you read this in English?
A little bit. It's a little close. Maybe you could just summarize it for us. It's a little hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is addressed.
And then we'll come back to Claire after that.
Yeah, to the SS doctor on the in Auschwitz, Camp Dr. K.L. Auschwitz, Hygiene Bacterial Examination Center of the Forces of the SS, Southeast Auschwitz. Enclosed focal smear tests for examination for Streptococcus hemolyticus, taken on 9th of July, 1944, from the following prisoners of Block 5A. My father's number and name, and my uncle's number and name, never to be seen. This is their last will and testament and their death warrant. Can you imagine a killer system that put everything down on paper? I know the evidence is all there. So, so when today you can hear at times in Toronto as well, Jews to the gas is it's quite acceptable now to say these things. this wasn't so, you know, when I came to Canada. So we need to be strong and we need to stand up. Students need to know, and they need to stand up and say, we will not allow you to do this, not in our school, not in our city, not in our province, not in our country. We will not let you do this, because this country has to be a place for people who are running for a better life. So, because this is a big game changer. You see, the Jews are the canary in the mine. They start with the Jews, but it doesn't end with the Jews. Unfortunately, that's so. There you go.
Thank you so much, Max, for sharing part of your story. Claire, I'm wondering, is it possible to get the slides put back up? Or is if not, it's okay. I'll just turn it back to you. I'll just actually read it. So those, you know, are one of my appeals and one of my learnings from Max is that we all have responsibility. I know over the past year, we've all experienced, you know, social divisions that as we've all experienced in the pandemic. But, you know, I think as a city and as a country, we've had our eyes opened to racism and discrimination that exists, systemic racism and systemic racism and discrimination that exists. But also how the social divisions and tensions of the last year have exacerbated that. And, you know, we've certainly seen that even in our own city or province in our country. And there's a quote that is part of at Auschwitz that's in one of the commemorative centers, and it says, "Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And so my promise to Max is that I would do my part within my sphere of influence to share his personal story, but to also share the message that our words matter. And I think our community would be able to grow and benefit from his message. And so that's why I am a champion for my chance alone.
Thank you.
And back to you.
So remember those two words that those 4 girls uttered: be strong and of good courage. Never forget that. Hazak We'amatz.
Thank you so much, Max and Mayor Veer. And just before we leave this evening, we just have some questions for our champions that we'll be asking all of our champions. And the first one for you, Mayor Veer, is why and when did you connect with this book?
Like I said, I had been invited to serve on this delegation. It really was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I was so humbled and honored to be invited as mayor of our city that I love so deeply. As part of the pre-reading for the trip, I read Max's book, and then, you know, traveling with Max and to be able to see places in person and to hear him tell his story. You know, like I said, I had a coffee every morning with Max where I would hear about that, and he changed my life for the better. And hopefully I'm using that to better our city. One of the most sobering moments was we were riding a bus and we were watching Schindler's List. We were in Poland, we were driving up to Auschwitz. And then we turned off Schindler's List, and Max's voice came over the speakers on the bus. And he started pointing out the train tracks that he had ridden in a cattle car for days and days, no food, no water, no waste buckets. And to hear Max's story up close and personal like that in the place where it happened was just transformative. This book's changed my life, and I think that it can help transform the people of our city for the better as well.
Which sort of answers our next question is, why should Red Deer read and choose By Chance Alone? It sounds like it was a transformative experience for you, and you hope to do the same for members of our community.
Absolutely, Claire. You know, there's so many great, and I love that the Red Deer Public Library, I love that you focus on Canadian authors. There's so many great books that we can read, and as a community, you know, a few years ago as a community, we chose for Red Deer Reads the Outside Circle, and that ended up being a very powerful night for our city. It was really set the stage for some truth and reconciliation in our city with our Indigenous community. And I really think Max's book can do that for us as well, and to really open our eyes to how important our words are. You know, words have the power of life and death in them, and you know, our words have consequences because our words become a mindset, and our mindset becomes a belief system, and our belief system becomes actions. And so, you know, I think that we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to bring Max to our city. And I would really love to be able to honor Max in that way, and for the public that I love and serve so much to be able to meet him as well and to experience what I've experienced.
And just our final question before we go this evening for you, Mayor Veer, is after reading this book, what are your thoughts about what can help people get through adverse times and events?
You know, I think that there are many things, and certainly in Max's book, I think speaks about those. So, you know, Max's faith got him through, his personal relationships. You know, he unfortunately didn't get to say goodbye to his mom and his auntie and siblings when they were in the selection at the camp. He didn't get to say goodbye to his mom and loved ones. So he had the support of his dad and his uncle. So certainly, you know, the support of people who love us. But it's that internal fortitude and persevering spirit that Max has talked about tonight, where Max said, be strong and have good courage, and to see things through, and to be strong on the inside, and to be strong for other people, and to realize that circumstances can change. We need to persevere through them. And sometimes the darkest hour really is before dawn. And so thankful that Max is named among survivors, and he's gone on to live not just a good life, but an incredible life where he is shining a light on these issues.
I want to thank you both so much for taking the time this evening. We really appreciate it here at Red Deer Public Library and our community as well. For more on Red Deer Reads, including upcoming champion visits, please visit rdpl.org/Red Deer Reads. You can also find out ways to borrow Max's and the other finalist books. And don't forget to vote for your favorite before August 31st. Thank you very much to both of you again, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care. Stay well and safe, everyone. Thank you.